Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. It's Grace, and the video that I'm going to be doing today is sort of like, is there a word for a third of the year? Like every 4 months? Basically, it's been 4 months since the Reddit r/fantasy bingo card came out, and so I thought that it would be fun to check in, have a look at the card, and see how I'm doing on the prompts based on what I've read since the start of April. And basically kind of talk a little bit about what prompts I've met and then what prompts I know that I'm going to get to in the near future. And this is more of like a check-in to see how I'm doing than it is about like future plans for the cards, but if something comes up, I'll say like, oh, maybe this is what I have planned for one of these prompts. So I will put a picture of the bingo card up here so that you can get a visual of what we're working with. But the first row of prompts is 5 short stories set in Asia from the A to Z genre guide, found family, and first person point of view. The second row of prompts is an r/fantasy book club pick, a new to you author, gothic fantasy, a backlist book, and a revenge-seeking character. The third row is a mystery plot, a comfort read, published in 2021, a cat squasher, which means 500 plus pages, and science fiction fantasy related nonfiction. The fourth row is a Latinx or Latin American author, self-published, forest setting, genre mashup, and has chapter titles. And then the final row of the bingo card is the title format blank of blank. So the next one on this row is first contact, but I might actually swap in a square from a previous year's card for this one, since that's part of the rules of the game. And then we have a trans or non-binary character, a debut author, and witches. So let's get into which of these prompts that I have filled so far in the first 4 months of this challenge. So the very first prompt, 5 short stories, I am well on my way to completing this one because I am actually still in the middle of the complete tales and poems of Edgar Allan Poe, which is quite a hefty book. That man wrote a lot of things. And I have been in the middle of it for a while because I'm just reading it very slowly, like one story at a time. But once I saw this bingo card come out, I did basically just count the next 5 short stories that I read from that collection towards this. So that would be, Edgar Allan Poe has some very odd names, so I'm just going to read them right off of my laptop. We have Xing a Paragrab, Diddling, The Angel of the Odd, Malanta Tata, and Loss of Breath. So those just happened to be the next 5 stories from where I started when the bingo card came out. And for this prompt for the bingo card, hard mode is actually to read a complete collection of short stories, which I am, like I said, I'm still working on that book, but I don't know if that's going to be realistic because it is ginormous, but you never know. Maybe I will get this on hard mode if I manage to read the rest of the Edgar Allan Poe collected works by the time like April 1st next year rolls around. We'll see. So next up we have Set in Asia, and hard mode for this one is actually written by an Asian author as well. And I have not filled this one yet, but I am hoping to read She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan very soon. So hopefully I will be able to fill this one because that is set in Asia. From what I've read, Shelley Parker Chan is actually an Asian Australian author, so I'm not sure whether that counts. Like, I'm not sure whether it has to be an author that actually like either lives in Asia or, but I doubt there's that kind of stipulation on it, so I think that this could count for hard mode as well, having been written by an Asian author. Then next up, we had a book from the A to Z genre guide, and this was basically a list provided on Reddit Fantasy Bingo on their original post. They actually had a link to what the A to Z genre guide is. It's basically books being given as examples of like types of subgenres of fantasy and things like that. It's been a while since I read the list, but I'm 99% sure that's what it is. So basically, the books on that list are what apply to this prompt. The hard mode for this one is actually to read a book from that list that is by a Black, Indigenous, or author of color. So for this one, I have Guards Guards by Terry Pratchett, which does fill the prompt, but of course does not fit hard mode, but that's okay. Maybe I will be able to fill this prompt on hard mode by the end of the year. So next up, we have the found family square on the bingo card, and the hard mode for this one is to have a member of the found family who is LGBTQ, identifies as someone part of that community. And so for this one, I had Kings of the Wild in this spot right from the get-go without actually knowing that it would fit for hard mode, because there is an LGBTQ character in Kings of the Wild. There is the wizard part of their band is gay and was married to a man, and that's like, I mean, that's who he is, but it's not really part of the story, so I feel like people never really mention it when they talk about the book. So that was a pleasant surprise, because I wanted to read Kings of the Wild anyway, absolutely loved it, and it does end up fitting this square for hard mode as well. Next up, we have first person point of view, and the hard mode for this is if the book actually has multiple points of view and like more than one of them are in first person. So I do have a couple of books that I've read that fit this. Serpent and Dove actually fits this on hard mode because both of our main characters' perspectives in that one are first person perspective, and then the other one that I read for this is Assassin's Apprentice, and there may be others, but for some reason once I'm finished with a book I am really bad at remembering what like format of perspective it was written in, and I don't know why that is, but I had to write these down right when I was finished so that I remembered them. So next up, we have a book that is an r/fantasy book club pick, and there are a ton on this list because this is part of a Goodreads shelf that actually exists on an account where like you can see the book club picks listed in that way. And then the hard mode for this is to actually participate in a discussion, so basically read the book when it is actually being read as a book club pick for r/fantasy, and then basically like if you read it at that time, then that fits the hard mode prompt. So I actually don't happen to have read any books, but it's been a while since I checked their list, so it's possible that I filled this prompt, but as far as I'm aware, I have not yet read a fantasy book club pick. So next up on the list is a new to you author, which I have read quite a few of this year, but the one that I picked for this is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, because the hard mode for this prompt is to also not be familiar with the author, like not really know too much about them before you go in and pick up like your first experience with one of their books, which definitely applies to Rebecca Roanhorse because obviously Black Sun had gained some traction on BookTube, which made me interested in it. But other than like hearing the synopsis of the book and hearing a little bit about how her background related to what she had written, like the inspiration for her world, I didn't know anything about Rebecca Roanhorse. So Black Sun fits the hard mode for this prompt. And then next up we have Gothic Fantasy, which I have not read, so that one stays blank for now. Hopefully I will be able to fit one of those in before this period is up. I keep wanting to say before the end of the year, but the end of the bingo card is like March 30th or 31st. Does March have 31 days? It might. The next square on the bingo card is a backlist book, and hard mode for this one was a book that was published before 2000. So for this one, I actually ended up using, wait a second. So I've just realized in the middle of filming this that you're not actually allowed to repeat an author. So I have Mort down here by Terry Pratchett for a backlist book, but I like failed to notice that I also have Guards down for another one, but Mort fits hard mode for backlist book, whereas Guards doesn't fit hard mode for the category that it's in currently, although I suppose it would fit hard mode if I put it in the backlist book category. Regardless, I will have to figure out which one of those I'm going to use and what I'm going to do about like the other category, because whoopsies. Next up, we have the revenge-seeking character spot on the card, and hard mode for this one is that seeking revenge is central to the plot of the book. So I have not filled this one yet, but the one that I'm thinking of for this is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter, because I do know for sure that there is a revenge-seeking character in this book, and I am fairly certain that the revenge is central to the plot. So I have a pretty solid plan for that square, even though I haven't actually read that yet, but that's half the battle. So next up we have a mystery plot, and the hard mode for this one is that the book cannot be a primary world urban fantasy. It has to be secondary world, or I suppose not urban fantasy, whatever that means. So basically, the one that I have down for this one right now is A Lot's Away by Darcy Little Badger, but this does not fit hard mode because it is primary world fantasy where it's our world, except there's like magic and stuff. So I will have to see if I read another book by the end of the year that like fits this. But A Lot's Away definitely fits the prompt. It just doesn't fit it on hard mode, so that's fine. And then next up is a comfort read, and there is a stipulation that you're allowed one reread on this bingo card, and the comfort square does not count as a reread if you are using a reread for it. So I haven't actually gotten to this square yet for a comfort read, but hard mode for it is to find a new comfort read. So like essentially, I guess you won't know until you're finished a book whether it fits this square or not, like whether it constitutes as a comfort read for you, but this is kind of like a free space almost, because if you want to reread something that you know you like, it's not going to count as your one reread, but it would be nice to like discover a new one basically. But I have not filled this prompt yet. Next up, we have Published in 2021, which I also have not read a book that's published in 2021 yet this year, but I have a few on my list that I really want to get to. I already mentioned She Who Became the Sun for being set in Asia, but another one that I could use for this is Blood Like Magic by Liselle Sambury, or I could also use The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. So there's potential there. And actually, I have my eye on Blood Like Magic for another category, potentially, so we will see how that goes. Next up, we have Cat Squasher, which is 500 plus pages, and then the hard mode for this is a Lion Squasher, which is above 800 pages. And so I am torn on this prompt because I have Leviathan Wakes by James S. A. Corey, the first book in the Expanse series that I have read that definitely fits the Cat Squasher for being above 500 pages, but I have read Wheel of Time books this year that are above 800 pages, so I might put one of those in here, but then I can't use it for anything else. Like I can't use it for like has chapter titles or like a fantasy book club pick or anything like that. So basically I do have this filled. I'm just gonna have to work out where each book is going to go, because The Shadow Rising and I think also The Fires of Heaven could definitely fit this. They are hefty boys, so we will see about that. But I think I've read a Lion Squasher for sure. Next up, we have sci-fi fantasy related nonfiction, which is a really interesting like niche genre that I definitely have not read in. I have not filled this one, but I am interested to know if anybody has any recommendations. Like put them down in the comments if you know of any good nonfiction books about science fiction fantasy, because I'm very interested to know. I'm not sure what I'm going to read for this one. So next up, we have a Latinx or a Latin American author, and I have not filled this one yet because the book that I have read that is by a Latinx author, or actually they might be Latin American, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm actually going to use that book for a different category. So for now, this one stays unfinished. And the next up we have self-published, which I am actually in the middle of reading The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wong right now. So I am counting that here because I'm loving it so far. I'm confident that I'm going to finish this book and then it will apply here. And the hard mode for self-published is to have less than 50 ratings on Goodreads, which I'm just going to be honest with myself, I'm not going to hit that. So it's going to be The Sword of Kaigen because I'm not good at hearing about books before like literally anyone else, and that's just how it is. Next up we have a forest setting, and I have not filled this one yet, but my potential pick for this is The Queen of Blood by Sarah Beth Durst, which I am pretty sure takes place primarily in a forest. Hard mode for this prompt is that the book takes place entirely in a forest, and I cannot say, obviously, without having read the book, whether that's going to be true or not, but that, to be fair, is a pretty hard prompt, like a book where everything is in the forest. I can't think of one that I've read, so we will see how that one goes. And then next up, we have a genre mashup, and then the hard mode for this is a mashup of like 3 or more genres. And so the ones that I currently have down for this are Serpent and Dove, but Serpent and Dove was currently filling another prompt, or potentially The Ninth Reign, because the way that I hear people talk about The Ninth Reign, it seems like it has fantasy, sci-fi, and mystery elements, so I think that that could actually fit hard mode, and hopefully I will read that book soon. The next prompt on the bingo card is has chapter titles, and the hard mode for this is that the chapter titles have to be more than 1 word long. And so for this one, I actually have The Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan currently, but like I mentioned, if I'm going to have to put one of the long Wheel of Time books in the Lion Squasher category, then this may have to change to something else, but it does fit hard mode because the Wheel of Time does have chapter titles that are like often phrases or like short sentences or definitely more than 1 word, so it fits. And next up we have the prompt that is the title blank of blank, or the blank of blank. And for this one, I have down The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson, which I also just read this month. And obviously it doesn't fit hard mode for this because hard mode is the blank of blank and blank. So I haven't read one of those, but at least I have this prompt filled, so that's good. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that there's a prompt on the last row of the card that's a first contact story, but in the rules of Reddit Bingo, you can substitute a square with a square from a previous year's fantasy bingo card, and the one that I have chosen to substitute in for this one is from 2019, and that is actually a middle grade sci-fi fantasy, because I've been reading the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series this year, and then the hard mode for this was that it has to not be a reread, and I am actually reading the Percy Jackson series right now for the very first time, so I thought that it would be perfect to fit that in there. So I do have The Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan fitting the hard mode stipulations for a middle grade sci-fi fantasy, where I've just inserted that square. Next up, we have the square that is a trans or non-binary character, and this goes back to what I mentioned with the Latinx or Latin American author square, where the book that I'm going to be using for the trans character is Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. And this does fit hard mode for this square because hard mode is that the character is a main protagonist. And Yadriel from Cemetery Boys is our main character, or like one of 2 main characters, but he really is our main character. And that is like the perfect book for this prompt. I also had Black Sun down, but the non-binary character is not like the primary character, there just is a character. Actually, there's a couple, but regardless, they aren't the main characters, so it didn't quite fit as well as Cemetery Boys did. And then next up, the next square is debut author. And when you read the rules of Fantasy Bingo, what this actually means to me is that it can be an author's debut, like whenever that debut came out. It just has to be you reading an author's debut work. So it's not like it has to be a debut author right now, like in 2020 or 2021. It just has to be their first book. So I looked into it a little bit, and hard mode for this category is that the author has done an AMA on Fantasy Reddit. So the one that I am choosing for this is going to be The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, because if I'm not mistaken, The Blade Itself was Joe Abercrombie's debut work, and Joe Abercrombie has done an AMA on r/fantasy. And I'm hopefully going to read The Blade Itself this month. So, I mean, if not, very soon, I swear, I promise. So, I think that's a great pick for that one. And then the very last prompt on the bingo card is witches. So the book that I have read this year that sticks out that has witches is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. So this fits hard mode for the first person point of view prompt and for this one. So once I read more books, I think I'm gonna have to reassess. Eventually, I will have to reorganize and figure out which category Serpent and Dove is going to be my pick for, and I think that will just depend on how many more first-person point of view books I read and how many more like witch books I read, because right now I'm torn between those two because it does fit hard mode for both of them, and Serpent and Dove actually fits quite a few of these prompts. So if you are by any chance doing Fantasy Bingo and you are looking for something to fill a category, there are quite a few possibilities for Serpent and Dove. It could be a cat squasher, it could be a genre mashup, fantasy romance, it could be that it has chapter titles, it could be, I believe this was her debut as well, it could be a new to you author. Well, actually, I guess it would have to be. If you're reading her debut, you obviously haven't read anything else by her, because this series, if I'm not mistaken, is the only thing that she has published. So when everything is said and done, I actually have books read currently for 16 of the 25 prompts on the card, which is pretty fantastic. Although, like I mentioned, I will have to do some shuffling, so these are not set in stone, but I did think that it would be fun to do this check-in and see how I'm doing, and I have to say, I am very happy with my progress for how I'm doing, because a lot of these I haven't been meticulously planning them. I've been seeing where these books fit, and some books have been pleasant surprises in that they have fit in categories that I did not know they would fit in. So it has been really fun, and again, if you are interested in looking at the r/fantasy bingo card and the rules or anything like that, I will leave that Reddit post linked down below, and have fun with it. And I think that it's a great way to diversify your fantasy reading, and honestly just to like find out about a whole bunch of books that you probably wouldn't even have known about before, because you're looking for specific attributes that are maybe outside of your comfort zone, which I just think is always a good thing. So that is going to be it for this one. Let me know what you thought of it. Let me know if you're doing this, what you've read, and thank you so much for watching. Like if you liked the video, subscribe if you want to see more from me, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!